Just months after the bombshell pyramid discoveries of early 2025, the world is reeling from yet another groundbreaking revelation out of Egypt. Brand new radar scans, completed only weeks ago, have unveiled something that by all conventional accounts should not exist, an enormous engineered underground complex hidden deep beneath the Giza pyramids. If true, this discovery could completely rewrite the history of the pyramids as we know it. Back in March 2025, archaeologists detected something stunning lurking below the Pyramid of Khafre at Giza. The initial radar data, revealed by Professor Corrado Malanga and his colleague Filippo Biondi, sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Their scans showed bizarre spiral structures and massive vertical shafts burrowing over 2,000 feet below the desert sands. These shapes were so precise, so deliberately organized, that dismissing them as simple natural formations seemed almost impossible, and yet that's exactly what many in mainstream Egyptology attempted to do, led most notably by the famous Dr. Zahi Hawass. Establishment experts rushed to brush off these revelations, insisting they were nothing more than radar illusions or misinterpreted data. Completely wrong, and lacking any scientific basis is how Dr. Hawass described the findings. According to him, these supposed structures were just natural geology, an explanation many found difficult to swallow given the clear patterns in the scans. That was only the beginning, because just weeks ago, something even more astonishing emerged from beneath Giza. A second round of scanning has uncovered an underground discovery that you genuinely won't believe, one that even the harshest skeptics will struggle to dismiss. Stay tuned, because what was found beneath the pyramids this time could change everything we think we know about ancient Egypt. In this report, we're diving straight into the heart of these new revelations. We'll break down Professor Malanga's mind-blowing findings beneath the Pyramid of Khafre, examine a mysterious 19-portal-like structure detected near Giza's ancient cemetery by a Japanese research team, and explore the very real reasons why authorities seem so hesitant about these new pyramid discoveries. History shows a clear pattern. Time and again, establishment archaeology has been quick to dismiss radical new findings, only to be proven wrong later. Think of sites like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, once thought impossible, now accepted as revolutionary discoveries. Could the same pattern be repeating itself under the sands of Giza? Is the skepticism we're seeing simple scientific caution, or do powerful figures within Egyptology, and perhaps even government institutions, prefer that certain mysteries remain buried? What could they have to gain from downplaying potential history-changing discoveries? One thing is certain, the truth beneath Giza can't be hidden forever, and the evidence we're about to explore is too compelling to ignore. Let's start at the beginning of this saga, the moment in early 2025 when scans first hinted at something incredible lurking deep below the Giza Plateau. March 2025. Bombshell discoveries beneath Khafre's pyramid. Picture yourself standing on Egypt's iconic Giza Plateau in March 2025. The scorching desert sun beats down, and the legendary pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure tower silently around you. Now imagine you're part of a cutting-edge research team, slowly sweeping ground-penetrating radar instruments over the sands, not knowing what, if anything, you'll find. Suddenly, the radar monitor lights up with a pattern that makes no sense at first glance. Beneath the Pyramid of Khafre, the middle of Giza's three great pyramids, the instruments register something unexpected and extraordinary. That isn't solid bedrock or random geology down there. It's a complex set of shapes, arrangements that look decidedly unnatural. That almost unbelievable scenario is exactly what happened in March 2025. Professor Corrado Malanga, a respected scientist from the University of Pisa in Italy, along with his colleague Dr. Filippo Biondi of the University of Strathclyde in Scotland, announced results from a detailed remote sensing survey under Giza. Using an innovative form of radar scanning, we'll get to the technology in a moment, they peered deep beneath the plateau, and what their instruments detected quickly made headlines around the world. The initial reports, picked up by international media within days, focused on four strange spiral-shaped structures hidden far underground, near Khafre's pyramid. These radar images showed what looked like huge cylindrical shafts wrapped in spiral patterns. To the untrained eye, it resembled enormous well-like holes descending into the earth, with something like winding staircases or ramps curling around their interior walls. Even for seasoned researchers, the images were baffling. Nothing like this had ever been documented beneath Egypt's monuments. Were these just odd natural rock formations, some kind of deep sinkholes or ancient lava tubes? Or could they be man-made, constructed by human hands in the remote past? The radar data suggested these features extended downward to astonishing depths, on the order of hundreds of meters. In fact, Malanga's team would later say the deepest signals came from about 648 meters below ground, roughly 2,100 feet down. To put that in perspective, that's nearly twice the height of the Eiffel Tower buried straight down into the bedrock, or about the height of 2 Empire State Buildings stacked underground. The sheer depth alone was mind-boggling. How could anything built by humans lie so far beneath the surface? Beyond the spiraling shafts, the March 2025 radar survey also picked up hints of what looked like channels or tunnels branching out horizontally. Some of the radar reflections suggested narrow, snaking passages connecting the bases of the vertical shafts. Intriguingly, certain anomalies indicated the presence of water or saturated soil along these channels. This raised the possibility that the ancient builders, if these were indeed built structures, may have engineered underground water systems, perhaps canals or conduits to direct groundwater. The idea that ancient Egyptians, or whomever built this, could have designed subterranean water management systems beneath the plateau is astonishing, yet not entirely implausible. After all, the civilization of ancient Egypt was known to be adept at managing the Nile's waters and had sophisticated knowledge of hydraulics. The ancient temple of Edfu, for example, has underground water tunnels, and some have speculated about water use in pyramid construction as well. Could these newly found underground channels indicate that the pyramid builders went to incredible lengths to control water under Giza? At the time these interpretations were highly speculative. The researchers themselves were cautious. Professor Malanga presented the findings as preliminary, intriguing anomalies that needed further investigation. He made it clear that while the patterns strongly suggested artificial construction, only additional data or eventually direct exploration could confirm their true nature. But one thing Malanga's team emphasized was the deliberate symmetry and design apparent in the scans. Natural rock doesn't typically form perfect helices or neatly carved tunnels, yet here were radar echoes mapping out shapes that had geometry, right angles, smooth curves, repetitive forms, something you'd expect from architecture, not geology. Malanga, Biondi, and another colleague, Armando May, were convinced enough by the clarity of the data that they went public with it. In a press briefing in Italy, they unveiled high-resolution 3D radar imagery showing multiple levels of these unknown structures below Giza. As Malanga would later recount, the data clearly shows large human-made chambers and tunnels deep beneath the pyramids. This is not geology, it's architecture. The implication was stunning. An entire hidden world might exist under the Giza Plateau. Naturally, such a claim drew intense attention, and with it, immediate pushback from many Egyptologists and geophysical experts. Within days of the announcement, prominent archaeologists began voicing their skepticism in newspapers and on television. Foremost among the critics was Dr. Zahi Hawass, the former Egyptian Minister of Antiquities and a globally recognized figure in Egyptology. Hawass has a long history of guarding orthodox views on Egypt's ancient sites, and he did not mince words here. Speaking to the press in quotes reported by the National and Euronews, Dr. Hawass asserted that Malanga's team was completely wrong, declaring that their so-called discovery lacked any scientific basis whatsoever. He insisted that nothing significant lies beneath the Giza pyramids, and suggested that the Italian researchers were either misreading natural geological features or were victims of faulty technology. In Hawass's view, those spiral shapes on the radar were likely just random distortions or mundane features in the limestone bedrock. He urged people not to get overexcited by what he considered unfounded claims. Many other mainstream experts echoed Hawass's doubts. The general sentiment among traditional Egyptologists was that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and this radar data, however tantalizing, wasn't yet proof of anything. They pointed out that ground-penetrating radar can sometimes produce ambiguous results. False echoes, blurring, or misinterpretations are possible, especially when looking extremely deep. It's true that in the past, GPR surveys at archaeological sites have occasionally identified anomalies that turned out to be nothing noteworthy upon excavation. Could this be a similar case, a high-tech illusion? Some geologists chimed in to note that the Giza Plateau's rock is fissured and uneven, potentially creating unusual patterns on radar. Additionally, serious questions were raised about the technology Malanga's team employed. As it turns out, they weren't using conventional ground-based GPR at all, but something even more cutting-edge, synthetic aperture radar (SAR) tomography from satellites. In plain language, they were analyzing satellite radar scans, similar to how scientists map terrain or even the ocean floor with radar from space, and applying a new algorithm to detect underground features. This method, they claimed, could read the subtle vibrations of the ground to reveal hidden structures, potentially peering far deeper than normal GPR. To many radar specialists, this sounded too good to be true. Dr. Lawrence Conyers, a renowned radar expert from the University of Denver, was blunt. He called the underground city claim a huge exaggeration. noting that known radar technology couldn't penetrate that deep into the earth. Conyers acknowledged that smaller voids or caves might exist under Giza. Indeed, the idea of some cavities under the pyramids isn't far-fetched, but the notion of a vast city-sized complex kilometers down was, in his professional opinion, not credible with current science. The only way to be sure, he emphasized, would be targeted excavations, actual digging, to ground-truth the radar results, and getting permission for such excavations at Giza is notoriously difficult, a point we'll revisit later. Skeptics also drew parallels to past false alarms. They reminded the public that throughout the years there have been claims of secret tunnels or chambers at Giza that amounted to nothing. For example, back in the 1970s and 1980s, some speculative authors claimed knowledge of Hall of Records chambers under the Sphinx, but extensive searches by professional teams found no conclusive evidence, or so it was reported. To defenders of the orthodox view, the Malanga scans felt like another fantastical story, great for generating viral news and wild YouTube videos, but likely devoid of truth once scientists took a closer look. However, history has taught us that truly revolutionary discoveries in archaeology often meet intense resistance at first. When Howard Carter discovered Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, many experts initially refused to believe the amount of treasure found until they saw it. When the Dead Sea Scrolls surfaced, scholars hesitated to accept their age and significance, and more pertinently, when Göbekli Tepe in Turkey was first surveyed in the 1960s, it was dismissed as a medieval cemetery, only later to be recognized in the 1990s as a 12,000-year-old Neolithic wonder. The fact is, paradigm-shifting finds usually seem impossible under the previous understanding. That's what makes them paradigm shifts. So in March 2025, with mainstream voices shouting, "It's nothing," and the Italian-led team insisting there's something huge down there, a sharp divide had formed. The general public was left wondering who to believe. Was this underground city real, or just a mirage of misinterpreted data? At that moment, no one had a definitive answer. But one thing was certain: if the scans were even partially accurate, the implications were enormous, and as it turned out, the initial March findings were merely the tip of the iceberg. In the weeks to come, the story would only grow more intense, as new scans brought the mysterious underworld of Giza into even sharper focus. June 2025, new scans unveil a vast subterranean complex. Fast forward to June 2025. The sun is blazing over Giza in the peak of the Egyptian summer, and Professor Malanga's team is back on the plateau with their instruments, this time armed with refined scanning techniques and an unshakable determination to either validate their earlier discovery or find out it was all a mistake. The world's media, having caught wind of the March controversy, is paying close attention. Many skeptics likely assumed that nothing more would come of the March radar anomalies. Perhaps they'd fade away like other fringe claims. But what happened next would reignite the controversy in spectacular fashion. On a sweltering day in mid-June, Malanga, Biondi, and their colleague Armando May gathered journalists and fellow researchers for a new briefing. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and a bit of skepticism. The team unveiled fresh radar scans, this time even clearer and more detailed than the ones from March. These images and 3D models were nothing short of jaw-dropping. What they showed was the outline of a massive hidden complex, truly akin to an underground city, stretching deep beneath the pyramid of Khafre and radiating out below the plateau. The vague spiral shapes seen in March had resolved into more defined structures, enormous vertical shafts, like gigantic silos plunging into the earth, surrounded by what appeared to be spiral staircases or ramps wrapping around their interior walls. Now the team was saying these were not 4, but 8 such cylindrical megastructures, arranged in some deliberate configuration under the 3 main pyramids. Each shaft was about 30-40 meters in diameter, and over 640 meters deep, 100+ feet. To help visualize, the tallest skyscraper in Egypt, the iconic tower in the new administrative capital, is around 385 meters tall. These shafts would dwarf that if stood upright. In fact, Malanga's report compared them to New York's One World Trade Center, the Freedom Tower, 541 m tall. These subterranean shafts are roughly 100 meters taller than that building. It's as if someone drilled 8 enormous elevator shafts, deeper than any metro system, and then built winding staircases all along the sides. The radar cross-sections even hinted at regular spacing along the edges of the shafts, which the team interpreted as possibly steps or slabs, lending credence to the staircase theory, and that was just one part of this complex. Connecting these deep shafts, the scans revealed a network of horizontal and sloping passageways, forming an intricate web beneath the desert floor. Some tunnels appeared to link shaft to shaft, others extended outward, possibly reaching areas under the nearby smaller pyramids or other points of interest on the Giza Plateau. The layout, as much as could be discerned, looked highly organized, almost like looking at the blueprint of a buried building, complete with hallways and rooms, except on a scale that is hard to fathom. At various junctures along these tunnels, the radar picked up open chambers, large voids that could be rooms or caverns. A few of these were truly gigantic. One particularly sizable chamber detected at an intermediate depth was estimated to be about 80 meters across, roughly the size of an Olympic swimming pool, or about as wide as a 20-story building. Imagine an underground hall that could easily house a cathedral, lying hidden in total darkness far below the sand, and you have a sense of what one of these chambers might be like. Perhaps most astonishing of all, Malanga's updated scans indicated that the entire complex reached depths of at least 700, 800 meters, approximately 2,300–2,600 feet below ground. That's nearly half a mile underground. If accurate, it means this would be by far the deepest large-scale ancient structure ever discovered on Earth. For comparison, the deepest ancient mine shafts known, like some prehistoric mining in southern Africa, go a few hundred feet at most. Even modern infrastructure rarely goes that deep, except for specialized mines or scientific boreholes. The team's satellite-based radar method, enhanced by AI processing, had effectively X-rayed the ground to an unprecedented depth, and what it revealed defied all conventional expectations of ancient engineering. Malanga's colleague Dr. Biondi explained that by using SAR satellites and analyzing micro-vibrations in the ground, they were able to achieve a full 3D tomography of the subsurface with surprisingly high resolution. In their words, it was as if the pyramid and the ground beneath had been made transparent in the radar images. The result was a map of a multi-level underground structure that shouldn't be there, but apparently is. The revelations of June 2025 immediately reignited the media frenzy. This time, even some previously skeptical outlets ran headlines akin to "Vast Underground City Found Beneath Giza," and new scans show hidden chambers under pyramids. It was still couched as a claim in need of verification, but the narrative was shifting. The evidence looked stronger. The public's imagination was, unsurprisingly, on fire. Were we on the verge of discovering a legendary lost realm beneath the world's most famous archaeological site? The comparisons came easily. It was like something out of an Indiana Jones film, or a revelation from the Assassin's Creed video game series, and the implications, if this was all real, were almost too much to comprehend. Who built such a thing, and when? How could the ancient Egyptians, who according to mainstream history, barely had bronze tools in 2500 BC, have constructed something kilometers underground? It suggested either a massively more advanced engineering capability than we credit them for, or perhaps the involvement of a completely different civilization altogether, an idea we'll explore soon. However, just as quickly as excitement mounted, the forces of skepticism and dismissal doubled down. Many mainstream Egyptologists and geologists responded to the June announcements with even stronger skepticism than before. To these critics, nothing had fundamentally changed. There was still no direct evidence, only remote sensing images that they believed could be misinterpreted. Dr. Zahi Hawass was once again at the forefront of the rebuttal. He appeared in several interviews, essentially rubbishing the new claims. In one particularly heated exchange caught on camera, an interviewer pressed Dr. Hawass about Malanga's findings, pointing out that the radar images clearly showed structures. Hawass bristled at the suggestion, insisting it was all nonsense. "That's not true," he barked, waving his hand dismissively. When the interviewer referenced the Italian scientist's data, Hawass retorted, "So what are you saying, that they're lying?" The interviewer responded, "They're showing these scans with spiral shapes," but Hawass cut him off. "They are completely lying. Those people are not part of our project. They said they can see kilometers into the ground with this stuff. That's not true." At one point, clearly frustrated, Hawass challenged the interviewer, "Do you even understand the technology? No? Then don't tell me about it." This exchange, while dramatic, encapsulated the stance of the Egyptian authorities. They were not buying it. Notably, Hawass referenced our project. He was alluding to the official Scan Pyramids project, an international initiative that had used muon scanners to search for voids in the Great Pyramid, a project he endorsed. Hawass was effectively saying only his hand-picked teams are credible, not these outsiders with wild claims. Other experts chimed in with more measured responses, but were still extremely doubtful. Archaeologist Dr. Mark Lehner, a leading Giza expert, though not directly quoted in the media this time, we can surmise his view based on past statements, would likely point out that no evidence of such construction has ever been seen on the surface, no debris, no access points, nothing in ancient texts. Geologist Colin Reeder or others might argue that the structures at depth could be misidentified natural cavities or perhaps imaging artifacts. Peer review was a common refrain. Malanga's team had not yet published these June results in any peer-reviewed journal, only in press releases and conference proceedings. Until the data was scrutinized by independent scientists, why should anyone accept it as fact? Yet, it must be said, Malanga's team was not acting like pseudo-scientific cranks. They were legitimate scientists who appeared to be doing everything they could to validate their findings. According to their statements, they cross-checked results using different satellites and different analysis algorithms, getting consistent outcomes. They even welcomed other experts to review their raw data. The team readily admitted their method was novel and unorthodox, but stood firmly by their conclusion that something artificial and immense is under Giza. As Malanga explained, the patterns were just too geometric to be coincidence. Nature might create caves, but it doesn't create a symmetrical arrangement of multiple 600 m vertical shafts all aligned and of similar size. By the June 2025 scans, the evidence for deliberate construction seemed much stronger than it had in March. It was harder to wave away the clear cylindrical shapes and rectilinear corridors as mere glitches, and at least in the court of public opinion, momentum was shifting towards we need to investigate this, not dismiss it. This leads to an important question. Why were the authorities so quick to reject even the possibility of these findings? The vehemence of the response from figures like Dr. Hawass raised eyebrows. Typically, a scientific reaction to a new claim might be, we have doubts but let's gather more data. In this case, the reaction was outright denial, and at times ridicule. It's as if certain gatekeepers of Egyptology wanted to shut the door on this topic entirely. That in turn fueled suspicions among the public, and certainly among ancient history enthusiasts, that something bigger was afoot, perhaps a deliberate effort to keep these underground mysteries under wraps. The June 2025 discoveries left us at a crossroads. On one hand, we now had compelling radar evidence of an extensive subterranean complex, call it an underground city if you will, beneath the Giza pyramids. On the other hand, the very people who control access to Giza's antiquities were uniformly saying there's nothing there, move along. With both sides dug in, the truth can only be settled by one thing, actual on-site exploration. But will that ever be allowed? And deeper still, the entire saga forces us to confront an even more profound issue. Could it be that the ancient Egyptians did not build the pyramids after all, at least not entirely by themselves? The idea sounds radical, even heretical, to conventional history, yet the evidence emerging from Giza and elsewhere suggests we must examine that very possibility. Before we dive into that, let's examine why the question of the pyramid's builders is even on the table. The answer lies partly in the puzzling lack of direct evidence within the pyramids themselves about their construction. Who really built the pyramids? The hidden builders question. One of the most unsettling aspects of Egypt's Great Pyramids, and this is something that often surprises people new to the topic, is how mysteriously silent these structures are about their own origins. Think about the Egyptian pyramids you've seen in photos, or perhaps in person, immense triangular mountains of stone, built with astonishing precision. You'd assume that such grand monuments, constructed as state projects by pharaohs, would be proudly inscribed with the story of their creation, maybe a dedication to the king, descriptions of the construction, records of the triumph of erecting them. After all, ancient Egyptians covered so many of their temples, tombs and statues with hieroglyphic inscriptions glorifying their deeds. But when it comes to the Great Pyramids of Giza, what do we find inside? Virtually nothing in the way of explanation. The interior chambers of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest one, are stark and bare, aside from later graffiti left by visitors. No pharaoh's grand proclamation adorns the walls. The same goes for Khafre's pyramid and Menkare's, they're internally silent. In fact, the only direct attribution of the Great Pyramid to Pharaoh Khufu, Cheops, as the Greeks called him, is something that wasn't even found in a public space within the pyramid, but rather in a hidden area that was never meant to be seen. A small piece of red ochre paint on a stone block in an upper relieving chamber, which bears a short inscription including Khufu's name. This was discovered in 1837 by Colonel Howard Weiss, and it's often cited as proof that Khufu built the Great Pyramid. Yet even this has controversy. Some have argued Weiss may have forged the mark, though that remains speculative. But more importantly, even if authentic, it's just a work crew inscription, Gang of Khufu, or something along those lines, not a formal dedication. Essentially, it's like finding a contractor's graffiti. Imagine building the most elaborate skyscraper today, and all you leave is a penciled note by some construction worker in a crawlspace. No plaques, no ribbon-cutting inscription. It doesn't add up if Khufu truly commissioned and oversaw the entire project. The point is, the pyramids of Giza themselves don't clearly tell us they were built in 2500 BC by Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. We infer that from other historical context, like Herodotus's accounts and some archaeological circumstantial evidence, such as the tombs of workers near the pyramids, etc., but the monuments are eerily mute about their creation. This has always been a little nagging fact, but mainstream Egyptology has largely brushed it aside, assuming the pyramids were royal tombs built over 20-year spans. End of story. However, when evidence like the new radar scans suggests there's more to these structures than we thought, like massive underground extensions, it cracks open the door to alternate explanations. Suddenly, an idea that's long been relegated to the fringes starts gaining plausibility. What if the pyramids, or at least the planning of the whole Giza complex, were the work of a civilization far older than the dynastic Egyptians? It's a daunting question, because if answered affirmatively, it would rewrite virtually every textbook on ancient history. But consider this, even the Egyptians themselves, in certain texts, hinted at great antiquity for some monuments. Take the so-called inventory stela, an artifact found in the 19th century near the Sphinx. It's often dismissed by Egyptologists as a later inscription. They date it to around 670 BC, that mythologizes the past, but what it says is intriguing. It describes Pharaoh Khufu visiting the site of the Sphinx and a temple of Isis at Giza, and it implies that these structures were already ancient in Khufu's time, meaning Khufu did not build the Sphinx, it was merely restored by him. In the stela's text, Khufu is said to have found the temple of Isis, and the statue of a certain deity, interpreted as the Sphinx, already there, buried in sand, and then he ordered restoration work. In other words, the stela provides evidence of far greater antiquity for these and other Giza structures, overthrowing the accepted timeline. Mainstream scholars argue the inventory stela is not reliable history, perhaps a propaganda piece by a later priesthood to claim divine origins. But it's a tantalizing clue that echoes what alternative theorists have been saying, that Giza's key monuments might predate the 4th dynasty, the era of Khufu and Khafre, by millennia. Now put yourself in the shoes of the Egyptian authorities for a moment. If you have been promoting and guarding the narrative that the pyramids are the crowning achievement of Egypt's Old Kingdom civilization, a source of immense national pride and identity, then any suggestion that they might be older or built by someone else can feel like a threat. It's not just about historical truth, it's about national heritage. The idea that some lost civilization, whether a prehistoric advanced human culture or, as extreme theories go, even extraterrestrials built the pyramids, and the Egyptians merely repurposed them or preserved them, cuts at the heart of the traditional story Egypt tells about itself. Therefore it's understandable on a human level that there's resistance. But should science be guided by modern national pride? Ideally not. We should follow evidence wherever it leads. Yet in practice, gaining access to test unorthodox hypotheses at Giza has been extremely difficult. Researchers who have proposed radical ideas or wanted to look for hidden chambers often find themselves hitting a bureaucratic brick wall. For instance, in the 1990s, geologist Dr. Robert Schoch and researcher John Anthony West conducted seismic surveys around the Sphinx. They actually did detect an anomalous chamber-like void under the Sphinx's paws. Schoch and West were very excited. Could this be the legendary Hall of Records, a rumored ancient library said to be buried under the Sphinx? They requested permission to drill or explore that cavity. Reportedly, the Egyptian authorities denied further access and sealed off areas, and that line of inquiry was dropped. At the time, Zahi Hawass, who was in charge at Giza, ridiculed the notion, and some suspect that even if something was there, it was intentionally kept quiet. Similarly, other independent Egyptologists or explorers, like Graham Hancock, Robert Bauval, and others known for alternative theories, have often been denied permits to conduct research on-site that might challenge conventional views. The control of access is tight. You generally need to align with the Egyptian ministry's approved projects, which often means staying within certain intellectual boundaries. This leads many to suspect that perhaps the authorities already know more than they let on. One provocative but not implausible idea is that the Egyptian antiquities officials themselves might have done internal surveys, with drills or ground radar in the past, and found hints of these underground features, but chose not to announce anything until they could figure it out, or fit it into the orthodox narrative. It's speculative, but consider, the Egyptian National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics, NRIAG, was actually a partner with the Japanese team that found a buried structure in the Giza Cemetery in 2022-2023, more on that soon. So Egyptian scientists are actively scanning the ground in some cases. If they came across something perplexing, would they freely broadcast it and invite a bunch of Atlantis crazies as they might see them to jump in, Or would they keep it internal? Food for thought. Let's also weigh the economic angle. Egypt's tourism industry relies heavily on the appeal of its ancient sites. The narrative taught worldwide is clear and neat. The pyramids were built as tombs circa 2600 BC, marvels of human achievement in the Bronze Age. If tomorrow it was proven that the pyramids are in fact 10,000 plus years old, and not attributable to the pharaohs, there would be a period of chaotic rethinking. Textbooks would change, yes, but also some tourists might feel a kind of disillusionment. So the Egyptians didn't build these. Then who did? Are we talking Atlantis now? It could also invite a swarm of non-Egyptian entities wanting to take over research, because if it's something so old, it becomes a heritage of all humanity sort of argument, not just Egypt's dynastic history. One could understand why Egyptian authorities would be very cautious about such a paradigm shift. It's not necessarily a sinister cover-up in the Hollywood sense, it can simply be conservatism and self-interest at play. Nevertheless, science advances by asking uncomfortable questions. And right now, the question of who built the pyramids is very much on the table, given these underground discoveries. Suppose for a moment that Malanga's radar city is real. The scale and depth of it would likely put its construction outside the capability of Old Kingdom Egyptians, around 2500 BC. We know the Egyptians could dig tunnels. They carved tomb shafts and galleries up to maybe 30 meters deep in the Valley of the Kings later on, but 800 meters deep, through solid rock, with nothing but copper bronze chisels and pounding stones? That stretches credibility to the breaking point. It hints that whoever made this underground complex had technology or engineering methods far beyond what we've traditionally attributed to that era. Either an unknown branch of the Egyptians with far advanced knowledge, or another civilization altogether. Some have speculated that perhaps the pyramids and the underground structures could date to an earlier epoch, like the end of the last ice age, approximately 12,000 years ago. Mainstream science currently scoffs at that because there's no acknowledged civilization that early with such abilities. But here's where things get really intriguing. Recent archaeological finds have already pushed back the timeline of advanced human societies. Enter Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe in Turkey. These sites, discovered and excavated over the last few decades, have completely upended our view of prehistory. Göbekli Tepe, in particular, is a massive stone temple site, dated to around 9600 BC, that's over 12,000 years ago, long before the invention of writing, or the rise of cities, even before agriculture fully took hold. Yet there it stands, huge T-shaped limestone pillars, up to 5 meters tall, and 10-20 tons in weight, arranged in stone circles with carved reliefs of animals. It was built by people who were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers at that time. Archaeologists initially didn't know what to make of it. In fact, Göbekli Tepe was first found and dismissed by researchers in the 1960s, who saw some stone slabs and assumed it was a later period cemetery. It wasn't until the mid-1990s, when Klaus Schmidt began digging, that the truth emerged. This was an Ice Age-era ceremonial complex of stunning sophistication. It forced archaeologists to accept that our ancestors around 10,000 plus years ago were organizing labor, planning large projects, and creating intricate art and architecture. Karahan Tepe, a site of similar age in the same region, has since revealed more stone structures, some carved out of bedrock, and even realistic statues, indicating that an entire culture, dubbed by some the Tas Tepeler culture, was thriving at the end of the Ice Age, with capabilities we never imagined. These sites were indeed initially met with skepticism. Some didn't believe the dating, some thought it must be a fluke, but now they are fully accepted and being integrated into the mainstream narrative, albeit slowly. What they prove is that human civilization is older and more advanced in deep prehistory than we used to think. Now apply that lesson to Giza. If an advanced culture existed in Turkey approximately 10,000 years ago, could an advanced culture have existed in Egypt or northern Africa around the same time or later? It's not a crazy idea. In fact, ancient Egyptian legend itself speaks of periods of rule long before the dynastic pharaohs, the so-called Zep Tepi, first time, when gods or demigods ruled, sometimes interpreted as a distant mythologized memory of a previous age. Most historians regard that as pure myth, but then most historians also didn't see Göbekli Tepe coming. It's worth noting too, many ancient cultures around the world have legends of an earlier age of greatness that ended in calamity, usually a flood. Mesopotamian records, the Sumerian king list, talk of kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years before a great flood. Indian texts speak of previous cycles of civilization. Indigenous peoples from the Americas to Asia have flood myths eerily similar in theme, a great deluge that wiped out a former world, after which civilization had to restart. For a long time these were regarded as just stories. Yet geological evidence now confirms that at the end of the last ice age, there were indeed cataclysmic floods and rapid climate shifts. The period known as the Younger Dryas, roughly 12,800 to 11,600 years ago, was a time of sudden cooling and then extremely abrupt warming. When the glacial period ended around 11,600 years ago, sea levels rose dramatically, massive floods would have occurred as ice dams broke, and megafauna died off. This timing is fascinatingly close to Plato's date for the sinking of Atlantis, approximately 9,600 BC, and to many flood myths. While the idea of Atlantis is speculative, the underlying event, a global flooding and climate upheaval, is scientific fact. So it's entirely possible that relatively advanced human societies, for their time, were devastated and largely erased by these events, leaving only whispers in myth and a few stone ruins like Göbekli Tepe, which survived because it was deliberately buried by its makers for reasons unknown. Given this context, consider the Great Sphinx of Giza. The Sphinx is traditionally dated to around 2500 BC as well, usually attributed to Khafre. But one of the first things that tipped off people like Robert Schoch that something was amiss is the pattern of erosion on the Sphinx's body and the walls of its enclosure. Schoch, a geologist, observed that the erosion looked like it was caused by rainfall and water runoff, the kind you'd get from torrential rains over a long period. Problem: Giza has been arid since around 2500 BC. In fact, the last time Egypt's climate could have provided enough rain to cause that type of erosion was probably pre-5000 BC, perhaps around the end of the last ice age, when northern Africa was wetter. Schoch concluded that the Sphinx might date to 7000–9000 BC or earlier to account for those weathering patterns. He also conducted seismic surveys around the Sphinx and found evidence that the floor of the Sphinx enclosure was much more weathered and older than previously thought. Plus he identified a potential hollow chamber under the paws. All of this led him to posit that the Sphinx could be a relic of a much older civilization, later adopted by the Egyptians. Of course, this theory infuriated Egyptian authorities and many archaeologists, who pointed to the lack of any other artifacts from such an early period on the Giza Plateau as evidence against it. They argued the erosion could be due to other factors, like salt crystallization, or the Sphinx being buried in wet sand at some point, etc. The debate continues, but Schoch's analysis remains compelling to many, especially combined with the inventory stela, which, as mentioned, says Khufu found the Sphinx already there and buried. Another piece of indirect evidence, the so-called inventory stela, again. It not only claims the Sphinx existed before Khufu, but also implies that the Great Pyramid itself may have already existed, as the House of Isis on the stela, and Khufu merely built a small pyramid for his daughter, and restored things. If that were true, it's dynamite. It would mean the Great Pyramid is from a completely unknown time. Most scholars say nah, the stela is late, and not factual history, but the idea is out there, lurking in the evidence that alternative researchers compile. Bringing it back to the subterranean complex. If indeed there is a vast engineered structure under the Giza pyramids, it could very well be the smoking gun that confirms an advanced pre-dynastic civilization. It might even be something like the mythical Hall of Records, a library of knowledge or a vault, as Legends and even Malanga's team alluded to. Remember, Malanga's group themselves mentioned the legendary Hall of Records when describing what might lie in the underground city. In one press statement they mused that the storied Hall of Records, often rumored to be a cache of ancient documents or technology buried since a flood, could be part of this complex. And Nicole Sicolo, the project spokesperson, went further by comparing the discovered chambers to the halls of Amenti, a reference to an ancient Egyptian concept, popular in esoteric circles, of underground halls where wisdom and perhaps bodies of gods are stored. Sicolo claimed these findings might provide spatial coordinates for previously unknown subterranean structures connected to sacred Egyptian traditions. It was a bold, if speculative statement, that essentially tied the hard data to the ancient legends. By late 2025, we thus have two parallel tracks: hard science data, radar scans, geological evidence, pointing to something big and old under Giza, and ancient lore and fringe theories which, remarkably, seem to be finding validation in that data. This is the point where a lot of previously skeptical onlookers start to wonder if the so-called conspiracy theorists were onto something all along. Could it be that a powerful few have known or suspected such truths and tried to keep the lid on, to avoid upending the historical narrative? Or is it simply institutional inertia and disbelief at play? We might soon find out, because the calls for an open investigation of Giza's underground are only getting louder. Before concluding, we should highlight one more fascinating development from 2024-2025 that adds another layer of intrigue to the Giza story. This one comes not from beneath a pyramid, but from an area just west of the Great Pyramid, in the so-called Western Cemetery, and the protagonists here are a team of Japanese scientists who published their findings in a peer-reviewed journal, meaning even the skeptics have to take this one seriously. A portal beneath the sand. Japanese team's mysterious L-shaped discovery. While the Italian radar saga was unfolding, a separate group of researchers halfway around the world was quietly making their own discovery at Giza, one that would only later be recognized as oddly connected to the larger puzzle. This team hailed from Higashi Nippon International University and Tohoku University in Japan, working in collaboration with Egypt's NRIA. Starting around 2020-21, they embarked on a geophysical survey of the Western Cemetery region of the Giza Plateau. The Western Cemetery is a field of Old Kingdom mastaba tombs, rectangular flat-roofed tomb structures, belonging to nobles and relatives of the pharaohs. It's just west of Khufu's Great Pyramid. The area is well mapped archaeologically on the surface, but there were parts of it that remained unexplored beneath the sand, especially spots that, strangely, had no tombs where tombs would be expected. One such spot was essentially an empty patch of desert floor among the grid of mastabas, almost as if something was intentionally left unbuilt, or later removed. This piqued the curiosity of the researchers, led by geophysicist Professor Motoyuki Sato of Tohoku University. Why was this patch empty? Could it be that something was underground there, unseen? To find out, they employed advanced ground-penetrating tools, specifically ground-penetrating radar, GPR, and electrical resistivity tomography, ERT. GPR would give radar reflections of subsurface structures, and ERT would measure electrical resistance to infer different materials or voids below ground. Over the course of 2 years, they collected data, carefully mapping an area of a few dozen square meters. The results, published in Archaeological Prospection, a scientific journal in May 2024, were intriguing to say the least. They discovered an L-shaped structure, just about 2 meters, 6.5 feet beneath the surface, almost directly under that empty patch. This structure was roughly 10 by 15 meters in extent, about 33 by 49 feet. Think of an L shape like a corner, or possible corridor turn, not just a simple square. The GPR and ERT images showed clear linear features forming this L pattern. It wasn't a natural shape, it had right angles and straight walls. Immediately, the archaeologists suspected it was man-made, perhaps the remains of some ancient structure or enclosure wall. But here's the kicker. This L-shaped thing was completely filled with sand and deliberately covered over. In other words, it looked like someone in antiquity dug out an L-shaped space or trench, built walls, maybe of limestone blocks, then later intentionally backfilled it with loose sand to hide it. Essentially a concealed structure. The fact that it was only 2 m down explains why it hadn't been noticed before. Casual digging or previous surveys just hadn't gone that shallow in that exact spot. The Japanese team didn't stop there. Their instruments also detected something deeper. Beneath the L, it's around 5 to 10 meters deep, 16 to 33 feet. The ERT in particular found a highly resistive anomaly, roughly 10 by 10 meters in size, essentially a squarish cavity or void. High resistivity in ERT often means air or dry sand, as opposed to wet clay or solid stone, which conduct electricity better. This suggested there might be an open space, or at least a different material, like a rubble-filled void at that depth. The GPR likewise showed an anomalous reflection down there. The combination of the shallow L shape and the deeper cavity led the researchers to propose a hypothesis. The L shape could be some kind of entrance corridor, or a portico, and the square anomaly below might be a chamber, possibly a tomb or shaft, that the entrance led to. It was like finding the top of a hidden doorway and antechamber to an unknown underground room. Given the context in the cemetery of Khufu's family, one straightforward idea is, maybe this is a yet undiscovered high-status tomb that was built and then deliberately buried, never to be used or seen. Perhaps an unfinished tomb, or a secret burial that was intentionally concealed. Yet the deliberate backfilling of the upper L shape is puzzling. If it was meant as a tomb, why fill it completely with sand after building it? Was it a ritual closing off, or did someone hide something here? The Japanese team kept interpretations cautious. They noted the feature could be vertical limestone walls, or a shaft, and that more investigation is needed. They also pointed out that this area had no visible tombs, which made it an anomaly in the cemetery. The fact that an important tomb might exist here could explain why that surface was left unbuilt, no mastaba above, perhaps because an entirely subterranean structure was there. Now why is this relevant to the underground city story? For one, it shows that Giza is still harboring undiscovered structures just meters under the sand, even in well-trodden areas. If a whole L-shaped building could be missed until 2024, what else might be lurking deeper or in other empty spots? Secondly, it introduces the tantalizing idea of hidden entrances or portals to deeper levels. The team themselves mused that the L shape might be a gateway to deeper chambers. What if this is one of the access points, maybe not to a single tomb, but to a larger underground network? Could it be that whoever engineered the vast tunnels that Malanga's team later found evidence of, had entrances in various places, and one of them was here by the Western Cemetery? Ancient lore often spoke of secret passages at Giza. Arab writers in medieval times mentioned extensive catacombs under the plateau, even a legend of a long-lost library beneath the sands. These were largely dismissed as fantasy, but now we see that at least in one case, a concealed corridor is quite real. Local folklore around Giza has also long held that there are tunnels connecting the pyramids to the Sphinx and other places. Some early 20th century explorers claim to have found entrances to passages, but those stories are hard to verify. The Japanese discovery near Khufu's pyramid makes those old stories a bit more credible. The L-shaped structure was so deliberately hidden that it underscores how much might have been intentionally buried by the ancients. We tend to think of archaeological remains as things that naturally got covered by time. But here we have an example where ancient people themselves covered something on purpose. Göbekli Tepe, interestingly, was also intentionally backfilled by its builders around 8000 BC. That suggests planning, maybe to preserve something for eternity, or to hide it from invaders or unwanted visitors. Could it be that at the fall of whatever civilization built the underground complex, they sealed the entrances to protect their secrets? It sends a chill down the spine to consider. The last people to walk those underground halls might have closed the doors behind them and left no trace on the surface. Following their publication, the Japanese team, to their credit, started an excavation in 2022-2023 to ground truth the L-shaped structure. Professor Sato reported that excavations were ongoing, and he was convinced the structure is man-made, given its distinct shape and consistency with masonry. If and when they fully dig it out, we might soon see an actual entrance emerge from the sands for the first time in who knows how many thousands of years. It could turn out to be just a tomb, but even that would be a great discovery. And if it leads to more, perhaps a tunnel or chamber beyond the expected tomb, then it becomes something truly paradigm-shifting. So by late 2025, we have multiple independent pieces of evidence, all converging. Malanga's deep radar city under Khafre's Pyramid, the Japanese shallow buried structure near Khafre's Pyramid, and a plethora of historical and geological clues suggesting Giza's secrets run far deeper, both literally and temporally, than mainstream history admits. We stand today at the threshold of perhaps the greatest archaeological revelation of our lifetimes. The Giza Plateau, long thought to have given up most of its secrets, is whispering of a story untold, a story of hidden chambers, spiraling stairways plunging into darkness, and possibly a civilization lost to time. New high-tech scans have pierced the veil of earth and stone, suggesting the existence of a massive underground city beneath the pyramids. If these findings are validated, they will force us to rethink not only the history of ancient Egypt, but the very origins of civilization itself. The journey we've taken in this discussion has been a roller coaster of discovery and skepticism. It began with those first puzzling radar echoes in March 2025, revealing spiral shapes and deep shafts that challenged our understanding of what lies beneath Giza. We saw how swiftly the conventional guard dismissed these anomalies, branding them errors or fantasies. But with continued effort, the research team in June 2025 unveiled even more persuasive evidence, clear images of enormous chambers and tunnels extending half a kilometer or more into the ground. The reaction from mainstream authorities was telling. Rather than excitement, we witnessed denial and even hostility. This raises a provocative question: what are they so afraid of? The facts should speak for themselves, yet it seems the gatekeepers of Egyptology are reluctant to even allow the possibility that something revolutionary is afoot. One cannot help but recall how many times in history entrenched experts have been proven wrong by new evidence. Göbekli Tepe was once thought impossible. Now it's in textbooks as the world's oldest temple. The earth was once flat in the minds of authorities, until it wasn't. To borrow a saying, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Right now, with regard to the underground city of Giza, we seem to be between the laugh at you and fight you stages from the perspective of the establishment. But truth has a way of emerging, especially when bolstered by relentless scientific inquiry. There is also a deeper layer to all this, the implications for human civilization's lost chapters. If an advanced society built sprawling structures under Giza thousands of years ago, who were they? Perhaps they were the early dynastic Egyptians after all, just far more advanced in engineering than we give them credit for. But perhaps, and this is looking increasingly plausible, they were people of a prior age, a civilization that flourished in the distant past, maybe in that misty period before the Great Flood, the end of the Ice Age, approximately 9,600 BC. These could be the people who inspired the legends of Atlantis or Zep Tepi, who knew things that their successors forgot. They might have built the pyramids, or at least the earliest forms of them, as power plants or star maps or something we have yet to grasp, and built a whole city underground, possibly to safeguard their knowledge or themselves from catastrophe. When the cataclysm struck, perhaps they sheltered in those deep halls, or stored their wisdom there, waiting for a future when their descendants, or we, humanity at large, would be ready to find it. It's a heady thought, almost science fiction, yet here we are with physical evidence, hinting it could be true. The notion of a hall of records, a library of ancient knowledge buried at Giza, was long derided as New Age fantasy, but given the data we have to ask, if there is a vault down there, what might it contain? Lost texts? Artifacts of power? Or maybe just the proof of that civilization's existence, the greatest treasure of all for historians. Even the possibility should ignite intense curiosity and a drive to investigate, rather than the stonewalling we've seen. Luckily, technology is on the side of revelation. As scanning techniques improve and more independent teams get involved, it will become ever harder to keep things hidden. The Japanese team's discovery of a hidden entrance shows that even working within official channels, significant finds are occurring. We also must acknowledge that the true heroes here are the scientists and explorers who persevered when few believed them. Professor Malanga and his colleagues put their reputations on the line by announcing something so extraordinary. They meticulously gathered data, cross-checked their findings, and openly shared them. They represent the best of science, bold yet careful, innovative yet evidence-based. On the other hand, the knee-jerk dismissal by some authorities does not come off well. Science is supposed to be about inquiry, not protecting dogma, but in the end, data can break down the walls of dogma, given time. Imagine for a moment the near future. After much public pressure and undeniable evidence, the Egyptian authorities finally greenlight a targeted excavation or drilling at one of the identified spots, perhaps at the end of that L-shaped corridor the Japanese found, or maybe in a spot near Khafre's Pyramid, where the radar shows a void close enough to the surface to reach. A team of Egyptian and international archaeologists, with cameras rolling, bore through the ground. Tension mounts, and then suddenly, the drill breaks into empty space at the predicted depth. They lower a camera and lights, and there it is, the carved stone wall of a man-made chamber glistening in the darkness, untouched for millennia. In further expeditions, an entrance is opened, and humans enter those corridors for the first time in recorded history. What will they find? Inscribed stone tablets, telling the story of a forgotten empire. The sarcophagus of a king who ruled in 10,000 BC. Machines or artifacts that defy our understanding. Or maybe just mundane storage rooms and tunnels, which would still be a marvel, because it means an underground complex was successfully hidden all this time. No matter what, such a discovery would captivate the world. It would unify scientists, historians, and the public in awe, and quite possibly, in humility, a reminder that our ancestors' story is far more elaborate and wondrous than we have assumed. It might also serve as a cautionary tale, a previous cycle of civilization that achieved greatness only to be wiped out by a cataclysm, which resonates with concerns we have today about global catastrophes or the fragility of our own civilization. History, after all, is not a linear ascent, but a series of chapters, some lost, some found. Right now, the evidence we've discussed is building a compelling case that the truth beneath Giza is simply too grand to remain hidden. The sands have concealed these secrets for ages, but the winds of discovery are blowing. We may be on the verge of answering some of the greatest archaeological riddles. Who built the pyramids and why? What lies beneath them? How advanced were those builders, and what happened to their knowledge? Each new piece of data, from the radar maps to the electrical scans to the geological analyses, is like a clue in a grand detective story. Put them together, and a picture emerges of a complex that was deliberately engineered and then purposefully hidden, waiting for us to find when we were ready. In conclusion, we stand at the dawn of a potential new history, of not just Egypt, but humanity. The massive underground city beneath the Giza pyramids, as revealed by these new scans, might be the key to unlocking that history. The coming years will be crucial. Will the powers that be continue to resist, or will they join the quest for knowledge? One hopes that curiosity and openness will prevail, because the treasures of truth that could be unearthed there belong to all of humanity, not to any one nation or ideology. The story of Giza is still being written, and we are fortunate to witness its rewriting in our lifetime. As we await further developments, one thing is certain, The sands of Giza will not keep their secrets forever. The pyramids have gazed down on us for 45 centuries. Maybe it's time we finally venture beneath their gaze and see what's been hiding in their shadow. The truth, as always, is down there, and it's just aching to be discovered. Let me know your own thoughts and theories about these astounding revelations in the comments below. Do you think we're on the cusp of confirming a lost chapter of civilization? How do you feel about the way mainstream experts have reacted? I'll be reading your comments and responding to some of my favorites. Until next time, stay curious. The quest for knowledge is never truly finished, and as Giza is showing us, sometimes the biggest discoveries are lying just beneath the surface, waiting for that brave explorer to unearth them.